What's going on, people? Today I wanted to do something a little bit different. I kind of wanted to go through the collection, and this is gonna be a two-part video. I started breaking down the cards, and I realized it's gonna probably be a little bit too much for one video. So we're gonna do today. I'm gonna take you through some of the cards that I feel are the best crafts as epics. And there's a lot of good ones, so it's not gonna necessarily be every good epic, just the best crafts, and then tomorrow or another day we'll go through and do the legendaries that I think are the best crafts. This obviously does not include cards from the Hero Pass. They're not craftable until after the season. This doesn't include cards from Follow the Dark Brotherhood story. They're not craftable at all. You have to just pull them from the treasure chest. So let's go ahead and take a look. The first card that I wanted to talk about in the strength attribute is Withered Hand Cultist. This card is playable in a ton of decks. Most of them are going to be mostly aggressive based, but a 3 Magicka 3/4 is a pretty solid stat line, and making actions cost 2 more is obviously huge for an aggressive deck. Whether it's making your opponent's fire bolts cost 3, their lightning bolts cost 6, or the ever important and game balancing Ice Storm not coming down until turn 8. A lot of times this card can just flat out be game winning, especially if you manage to get some creatures out ahead of it to protect it. A lot of your opponent will be forced to spend like 7 Magicka on a Piercing Javelin, and at that point, that could be, even if they manage to get rid of the Withered Hand Cultist, it can be enough to win the game. Next up, on a very similar kind of path, we have Earthbone Spinner. When you're a aggressive deck, a lot of times your opponents are going to try to answer you with guards, big guards, or wards, or things like that. Earthbone Spinner, a 3/2 body isn't fantastic, but you're not so much playing it for the body as much as you're playing it for the silence and deal 1 damage. You may ask, like, why run Bone Bow? Bone Bow costs 2 and it's +1 attack and it's just a pure silence. And Bone Bow is fine in some scenarios. But Earthbone Spinner, the 3/2 body, leaving a body behind for an aggressive deck is pretty big because you don't want to take a turn doing nothing on the board. And the deal 1 damage along with the silence is great against things like Breton Conjurer, or if they have 1 health left over. And then the silence is just a bonus. It gets you past the guards, allows you to go face. Earthbone Spinner is just a great multi-purpose card. Also gets rid of lethals and things like that. Finally, for strength, we have Belligerent Giant. 7/4 for 7 doesn't seem fantastic, but it has breakthrough. It has a high attack stat, so it feels good. And it's one of those cards that's kind of playable across the spectrum. You're not going to play this in like your most aggressive decks all the time, but your mid-range red and your control red are almost always going to be running Belligerent Giant. It's flexible. It can bounce a guard out of the way, bounce a last gasp that you don't want to trigger. It has the additional effect of being able to destroy supports. Belligerent Giant is one of the most flexible cards in the game. It does die to Lightning Bolt, but that's really the only downside of this card. This card is just incredible. Next up, we've got Intelligence. The first card we're going to talk about here. There's not actually a ton of great epics in Intelligence. I was going through and I was actually kind of shocked at how few. Like, things like Peddler are good, but more Spymaster is solid in the right deck. Conjuring's a fun card that I love, but I wouldn't really call any of these must-crafts. The closest thing we've got are a couple here. First thing's Breton Conjurer, and I feel kind of the weakest about calling this a must-craft. Even this one I would say is debatable. But a 4 Magicka 1/1 seems pretty garbage, and you're going to probably want to play this card alongside other pings. Something like a Skaven Pyromancer is even better, so if you can trigger this right away. But the real value from Breton Conjurer comes from the 5/5 Frost Atronach that you can generate. Additionally, this effect is repeatable, so if you do summon 1 Frost Atronach, you can plop down a Ward Crafter and reward your Breton Conjurer, and that will allow you to swing again and get another 5/5 Atronach. Again, I don't feel super strongly about calling this a must-craft, but I'm trying to give 3 must-crafts for each color, and this is the closest that I came besides the other 2. The biggest one, and this one is like S tier, star. If you're playing any slow deck, you're probably playing some sort of intelligence-based deck. Intelligence or willpower-based are the 2 main versions of slow deck, if not combining them and playing mage. But if you're playing an intelligence-based control deck, you want Ice Storm. Ice Storm is the best and one of the only board clears in this game. It is damage-based, but that's still fine. 3 damage to all means you can almost, in 1 card, take out your entire aggro opponent's board. I can't say enough about how good Ice Storm is. Ice Storm and Lightning Bolt are the 2 damage tiers that things are balanced around. Well, I guess Firebolt counts as well. Firebolt is how early game creatures are balanced. Lightning Bolt is how mid game creatures are balanced. And then Ice Storm is like the de facto, like, aggro clock card. So this card is just obviously incredible. And finally, this was another kind of tough one because it obviously needs a very specific type of deck, but Master of Arms is another one I'd include. I would say that Item Sorcerer is one of the best decks in the game at the moment, and Item Battle Mage, while not quite as good as Sorcerer in my opinion, is certainly plenty playable. And even to an extent, a Item Shackle Assassin is playable. And all of those cards really rely on the combination of Gardener of Swords and Master of Arms. Even without a Gardener or a full-on item deck, Master of Arms being able to get recursive value out of your Tomes of Alteration or your Maces of Encumbrance. Those are the two main items it's going to be pulling in most item decks. It's just incredible. Again, it needs a very specific type of deck, but this card is very, very solid. Next up, we've got Willpower. First Willpower card I want to talk about, and it was kind of a toss-up between Dawnstar Healer and Pit Lion, but I'm going to give the edge to Pit Lion. If you look at the top Legend ladder, a lot of the decks are either a variation of Aggro Crusader, but mostly kind of geared towards tokens, and I think I'm one of the only ones up there, but Token Spellsword is gaining popularity pretty quickly. What both of those decks have in common, besides going wide and buffing all your token creatures, is that with the ring, you can plop down a turn 2 5/5 fairly easily because your two main 1-drops in token decks are Marked Man and Scouting Patrol, both of which, for 1 Magicka, can satisfy Pit Lion's requirement. Even if you're not a token deck, Pit Lion can fit into a lot of decks. It's just an incredible body for 3. It is like the best card you can have in terms of getting stats on the board quickly as an aggro deck. It's just a fantastic card. Obviously, if you don't like playing tokens or decks of this nature, you can pass on Pit Lion, but it is just one of the top cards in the game. Next up, I want to talk about Rs Illusionist. This card is up there. If not the best prophecy in the game, it is certainly very close. Top 3 at the worst, I would say. It is the best prophecy body to cost ratio that we have. You feel pretty solid about playing Cloud Rest on curve. That's how good this card is. The -4, -0 means that you can almost all the time reduce your opponent's creature down to 0 attack, allowing you to make trades that you otherwise would have lost creatures. Now you get to keep one or multiple creatures alive, which already makes Cloud Rest Illusionist incredible. A 4/3 body with that effect is already plenty playable and pretty good. And then on top of it, you get a prophecy, so you can get a 4/3 body for free, which is nuts. Additionally, this does count as a defensive prophecy, so when you hit this, you can potentially, if you were at 3 health and your opponent has a 4 attack creature left on the board ready to attack, you can bring that down to 0 and buy yourself an extra turn. This is just one of the best cards in the game at the moment. It is great bang for your buck as an epic. And finally, we got Divine Fervor in Willpower. It's just one of the better supports in the game. Giving everything on your board +1/+1 means you are taking creatures out of their normal trade ranges, which is incredible, and you're pushing damage across the board as well. This card really shines in token decks where you're going as wide as possible, but this card is playable in a ton of different decks. It's just a very, very good card. Next up, we've got Agility. The first card I want to talk about for Agility is Mournhold Trader. This is one of the best early game aggro cards in existence. Pit Lion's up there as well, but Mournhold Trader, no condition. It does have a downside, but being able to ring this out on turn 1, a 4/4 body on turn 1, is obviously just bonkers. And yes, it has the downside of when this creature dies, your opponent summons a 2/1 Mournhold Trader with Guard, but really that downside's not too bad unless this card is being answered by like a turn 1 or 2 Fighters Guild Recruit. That's really the only time that this becomes bad, because even if this card swings once or twice and then gets hit with a Lightning Bolt or a Javelin or something like that, you still dealt 8 damage with a 2-drop over the course of like 2 or 3 turns. So this card's just incredible. This is one of the best aggro cards in the game. You're going to want to just slap this down and reap the benefits. Also pretty good in a Slay deck. Allows you to start beating down your opponent and gives you a pretty weak Slay token creature to trade into. Give some honorable mentions to Werebat, Murkwater Shaman, and Murkwater Skirmisher. They're all solid. Skirmisher obviously only playable in Goblins decks, but ultimately those 3 did not make the cut for me. What did make the cut, and they may be considered weird inclusions, first is Giant Snake. I think this card is just like massively underrated for the life of this game. It's a 3/3 body for 5, which isn't fantastic, but against your aggro opponents, you can lock an entire lane down, buy yourself time to find more answers, or dictate trades next turn. Even in your own aggressive or mid-range deck, if you're racing your opponent and you can lock their entire lane down while you're continuing to push damage, this card is just really, really, really good. And finally, the last epic creature in agility I want to talk about is Leaf Lurker. This card is just a tempo gaining god. It's a 5 magic, a 4/3, so the body's a little bit off for the stats. The body is off for the cost, I should say. However, this is a very minor condition for a pretty major upside. As long as you can damage a enemy creature in any way, this card is Javelin with a body, which is pretty solid. I mean, in green, you have things like Murkwater Witch, which can give -1/-1, or Curse, or any of the Curse generations, or just pick your way of dealing damage. Leaf Lurker can kill. It kills through Ward, it kills Guard, it kills no matter the stat line, and then you're left with a 4/3 behind. This card is just an incredible card. If you don't have it, you should have it. Next up, we've got Endurance cards. The first Endurance card I want to talk about is Preserver of the Root. It's just a solid card. It's a 4 magic, a 4/4. You don't really want to play it on 4, though. Ideally, you wait until turn 7 or later, or if you've obviously ramped, you can play it earlier, so that this can be a 4 magic, a 6/6 guard. A lot of your purple-based decks, if they're not aggressive ones, are going to be kind of ramp or slower control decks, and being able to get a 6/6 body with guard down is the exact kind of thing that you want, because you need to protect yourself when you're not healing. You need to answer your opponent, and this should soak at a minimum 2, if not 3 or 4 attacks from your aggro opponent. It's just a very solid card. Next up, we've got Shadowfen Priest, which is kind of like the purple equivalent of Belligerent Giant. It's a 5 magic, a 4/4. Obviously, this card is the control slash more control version, where Belligerent Giant can be slightly more aggressive. This card is a 5 magic, a 4/4. Can silence an enemy creature, so it does get by guards in a similar way that Belligerent Giant can. Shadowfen Priest can also destroy enemy supports, so this card is just incredibly flexible. Silencing does remove cover, so you can trade into things your opponent was trying to hide. Shadowfen is just a very, very good card. And my final epic card in purple would be Night Shadow. This card doesn't go in every single deck, but a 6/5 with Breakthrough and Drain is a pretty incredible combination. If you're a traditional control deck, the Breakthrough is actually a downside on this card. You don't want to be breaking runes while you're draining, but a 6-attack drained creature is incredible. It's playable in a variety of decks. Next up, we've got the multi-attribute cards. So these are the class cards, and this one was tough because every single one of these cards, for the most part, is good in their own way. These are the only two that I would say don't quite fully measure up. I didn't have Soulset on, I'm sorry. But first one I want to talk about is Rift Thane. This card, again, really, really good in aggressive decks. It's actually good in multiple ways. You can come down as a 2 magic, a 4/2 with Breakthrough, which is basically a 3-drop, more or less, that you're getting on turn 2. Additionally, if you are in an aggressive race with your opponent and you're behind, Rift Thane can come down as a 2/4 with Guard, which again is essentially a 3-drop, and it being able to pivot into a Guard during races can mean that you block potentially 2 attacks from your aggro opponent, which might get you back into the game. Rift Thane, incredibly flexible, incredibly powerful card. Next I want to talk about Edict of Azura. Spell Swords, like Premier Removal. It's 1 cost, cheaper than Javelin. I know it doesn't have Prophecy, but a 4 magicka remove anything is very solid, and this card has the added benefit of being able to remove supports. Just super flexible card. It will be good the entire lifetime of this game. Again, all of these cards are very solid, but the final one I want to talk about for multicolor is this fellow right here. This is like the best feeling ramp card in the game. It comes down, essentially, since you ramp right away, and it gains +1 attack whenever you ramp, it comes down as a 5 magic, a 3/4 with Guard. So that stat line is good enough. It is defensive, which is exactly what your ramp decks want to be. It can soak up multiple attacks, and it ramps. It's the complete package. It's exactly what you want. And finally, for the neutral cards, this one's a little tougher, because like Mechanical Ally is a Battle Pass card, or this easily would have made the list. But there's only two that I would really suggest you consider, and one of them is very conditional. The first one is Stronghold Eradicator. This one is the one that's kind of just good. It's a overstated card, 5 magic, a 6/6, with the summon ability, give all enemy creatures in this lane guard. Ideally, you want to have this come down on like an empty lane or something you were going to trade into anyway, so you're just taking advantage of the overstated creature in a mid-range deck. However, this does have some practical applications where if your opponent's trying to hide something in the shadow lane, this card can give it guard, allowing you to trade into it. But in general, you just want this as a big body in your mid-range deck. And I guess this is sort of an honorable mention, but Halls of the Dwemer, it's a 6-cost support. It gives you a 0/3 Dwarven Spider with guard, and all friendly Dwemer have +3/+0. This card is really the one that makes the Dwemer strategy tick. I don't think we quite have enough Dwemer to really reliably make this a thing right now, but this is the kind of card to keep in mind for the future. So I would say this is a must-craft eventually. Honestly, it's not super far off. Once Mechanical Ally comes down, once you have Mechanical Ally with a couple other neutral cards, Eradicator, Centurion, you can get kind of the shell of a Dwemer deck going, and this is your payoff card. If you hit this on turn 5 or 6 with your Dwemer, gives every Dwemer on your board +3 attack. So even if you have like 3 Dwemer ready to go, that's +9 attack, and you're getting, with this buff, it's a 3/3 guard for 0. This is just the card that makes Dwemer tick. Again, I don't think we're quite there yet, but the time is coming. Keep this card in mind, and it will be a must-craft soon if you want to play Dwemer. But yeah, that's going to be it for now, guys. We'll be back soon to talk about legendaries that are your top-tier crafts across all of the colors and attributes. Yeah, let me know what you guys think, if there's any cards that you disagreed with me on. A couple of them are pretty tough choices, like those multi-attribute epics. You could have chosen most of them. And there's some equally difficult choices for the legendaries as well. But thank you guys all very much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.